Hello and welcome to the first pilot podcast for Skillsminer. This podcast, Kirsty and I have a little chat about the change and transition that we've been seeing happening in the last week in the UK, and we share some thoughts around how people can help themselves with that and also how organisations can help people. So we hope you enjoy. Any questions, do please let us know. Our first go at a Skillsminer podcast, and it's me, Dinah Turner, and
Kirsty Mitchell, CEO and founder of Skillsminer, no less.
That's right. And we're just starting to think about really running a bit of a podcast to share some of the thoughts and discussions that we're having with customers and with clients, with employees and with communities. And we thought we'd chat about it and see if people were interested in some of that. And then we could listen to some of your feedback as well. Yep. So, Kirsty, should you kick us off with, wow, what a week we've had?
I know. It's kind of a bit eye-opening, all the change that we've gone through. And, you know, it is incredible, actually. There is a really great feeling of optimism out there. I also think, though, a lot of people will be thinking, you know, how do I cope with the transition? You know, what next? How do we forward plan? What things should we be thinking about? And we're seeing a lot of paused and held breaths at the moment, and as they go through that kind of change. But it's exciting. It's nice to see people kind of having a little bit of a renewed sense of kind of hope. I think that's the feeling that I'm getting from people.
Yeah, it's very different. I think a lot of people, I mean, obviously this isn't a political podcast, but it's different for a lot of people. Some people are concerned how things will be impacting them. Other people are seeing things as a refreshing change. But I think change is, regardless, that's what's happening. We're all living in the change right now, aren't we? Regardless of what our views are, we're going to have to cope with some change.
Yeah. And that, you know, always at this time, people who are a little bit more inclined to be adaptable, enjoy challenge, all of those things will thrive at this time, you know. But those of us that just like things to be a little bit more mapped out will potentially kind of find it kind of overwhelming at times. And I think that's, you know, last week I was with one of our customers, and they had a fantastic session with new starts in the business and just talking about change, you know, and talking about how their careers have changed, and talking about even changes with the technology sets that they have, and how they walk customers through that, and that imparting of knowledge, that knowledge sharing, I thought was like really it was really powerful, just to hear the questions from both parties and kind of thinking about things in different ways. But it was also like they're really helping one another, you know, to kind of see through this transitional period, you know, and so that was good. So there's lots of good things that I think that people can do at this time.
And I think that's interesting as well, because that's very human, isn't it? Talking to one another about what you've seen before, what you're going to do next, and connecting on a human level is quite important to people, I think. Do you?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that for those of us that have been through these changes maybe lots of times with business, or even in the political and economic landscape, we can there's a kind of predictability to some things that we see, or a kind of a known way that we navigate through these situations. So it's good, I think, to reach out to other people at this time and kind of like help them to see some of the things that you've maybe experienced before, and ways that you've coped. So.
Yeah. And so in terms of optimism, so some of the things that we're seeing changing this week, there's some big items in the news as well. What are some of the things that have struck you this week?
Oh, wow. I think for some people, you know, especially in some of the organisations that we are working with right now, the rate and pace of transition that they're going through because of the technology and the products that they're bringing into the marketplace is really exciting. And then on the other side of that, we're seeing people facing mass redundancies, you know, and it can feel devastating, you know. And I remember going through that in the 90s and watching even my home village, you know, lots and lots of people be made redundant all at the same time has an incredibly it's a very, very difficult thing to kind of overcome, because you've got to then think about what's the next step and where are those opportunities. But I would say to those individuals that are going through that at this time, never before has there been probably a call or a demand for skills or people who have those adaptable skills. And it's just being able to navigate that, find your place in that, understand that, you know, even if you've got 60 or 70% of what it is that that employer might actually want, there's lots of training opportunities as well. In these growing sectors. The green sectors, for example, are absolutely booming at the moment. And in fact, they're under real pressure to find talent. So, you know, it's very difficult. I wouldn't want to just kind of fob it off and say every cloud has its silver lining, you know, because that is very tough, you know, because for some people, they could be living rural and having to think about, well, where do I have to go to get this new job? Not all jobs are going to be offshore in factories. A lot of it is online as well. So there is opportunities, you know, there is real opportunities for transferable skills more than ever before. So again, navigating change.
Yeah, exactly, because a lot of those jobs are jobs that we haven't seen before. So there was an article that we saw this week that was about the EV, electric vehicle skills. The skills don't exist in the people in our current motor companies. They're the people in other jobs in other places that are going to be needed in that space.
Absolutely.
And I suppose that maps across to other energy transition jobs, that we're sort of heading towards this just transition, you know, that we don't do the same as we've done before when we've changed our supply of energy to something different, that we leave ghost towns. You know, we don't want that. We don't want communities falling apart. So what are your thoughts on some of that, really, about how can we manage that in a way that's more people focused, more human focused again?
Oh, I think this really comes down to, again, employers really looking at the transferable skills that they need in their business, and not just going by those job titles, because a lot of the time the actual core skills and knowledge and competencies that are required for those roles can be trained or are transferable to a certain percentage from other existing roles that we have. So I think it's about being very open-minded. I think it is also looking for talent in communities. You know, I think the power of that transition exists in our regions, you know, and I keep coming back to this people and place. I've always really believe in that, you know, and I think it's just how we communicate with one another and how we engage with others. So engagement, talking about the transition that we're going through, trying to communicate better what we need and what the business requires, you know, and being really realistic about that at this time, because I think that makes it easier for people entering the labour market or making that transition. It can be quite overwhelming for people when they look at some of these job titles as well. I think they don't self-identify with that, and why would you, if it's you know, a new piece of technology or a new process that's never been done before? You may think that, well, I don't know if I would actually have a capability to be able to do that. And even more so, actually, if you feel a little bit under par or like struggling a bit because you have just been made redundant, I think the confidence to make that leap is sometimes a little bit scary. And also as well, we see the same thing internally in organisations. There's incredible communities within the groups and the subgroups that we have in larger organizations, and sometimes they can exist like silos, or you know, especially if they're big national or international organizations. And what we're really trying to say to employers is that sometimes that skill set already lies just right underneath your nose in your own organization. Reach out to the people that you have, look for those skills first, because sometimes to take that person on that transition is a little bit shorter than looking for it externally. And then as you're creating those new roles in the business, we're allowing for new talent to come through. So it's again, transition this concept of community. It can be, yes, at a regional level, yes, at a national level, but also it's the communities that exist within our own businesses too. Not just looking at one department and then this other siloed department and thinking that they don't interconnect in any kind of way. And again, the session I was in last week were two, very disparate parts of the business imparting information to one another. So enriching, to the point that the L&D team were kind of saying, oh my goodness, we don't want to lose the talent from this department over here, and vice versa.
Yeah, I suppose you have to be careful with that, don't you? But I think it's kind of switching to a bit more of a sustainable mindset, really, isn't it? In terms of like, instead of using people like the resources that you're just going out and hiring them, they do a job. When you haven't got that job anymore, you're shifting them off and, making people redundant and treating it in that sort of consuming way. Instead of that, you're looking at it and thinking, well, actually, we've spent a fortune onboarding these people. Absolutely. We've spent a fortune giving them all those skills. And actually, they've got really good communities of practice and friends and relationships with people here. So why wouldn't we try and retain those people? Why wouldn't we try and reskill them? And I use a phrase sometimes when I'm working with different businesses as well. It's thinking about shop the wardrobe. So it's like trying to move away from that fast hiring, fast problem solving, to thinking a little bit more like, well, what have I already got here? And what can I repurpose? What can I reskill? How can I really dig into that treasure that we've got and come up with something new? And that's sometimes maybe that feels too hard for people. Maybe that feels like a difficult thing to do, and it's easier to sort of plug in one thing and plug out another thing. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting concept. We had a discussion with another technologist from the States last week, and they were talking about this concept of almost like removing the leadership title from the actual job description, but just looking at progression of the person within the business and how they're rewarding that, imparting knowledge and building the productivity is, and rather than the job title is the thing that we're growing towards, So I think there's some really creative ways in which businesses can approach that differently. But I definitely would be saying, my goodness, it's like even acquiring sales, it costs more to find new customers than it does to actually retain and grow a fantastic relationship and grow together, and I would be saying the same to all of our customers right now. Look at what you have inside. Look at what you can do with those people who are vested in your business and you've invested in them. And then let's look at augmenting that story with the skills that are missing maybe within our own organizations then. But it's about digging for those hidden skills, I think, too, and it's again tricky with the pace of change that's out there at the moment, and tricky when there's so much emerging technology entering the marketplace to kind of keep up with that. So, L&D teams are working overtime, recruitment teams are working round the clock, HR are like working round the clock with onboarding and things like this. So really creating great process for people in your organization, I think, is also another really important thing that we're seeing coming through, even from with some of our bigger technology partners too at this time. They're really thinking about, how do we retain this person and onboard them into the business, and then even when they're here and they've been here for a year, what things are we doing with them? How is this integrating? How are we showing them what those next steps are? So when they do start to think, is this it? Is this all that there is really for me in this business? And or the job opportunities that are in the business are still posted somewhere on the intranet site. It feels sort of, again, that I'm having to self-identify. Would I be able to do that? Or and then
you're limited by your own beliefs then, aren't you? You're limited by what you think. Well, I've only done, and we know this from women applying for jobs, don't we, that women only, they won't apply. What's the data? It's like only if they've done 100% of what the job asks for will they apply for it, whereas guys will apply for something if they've only done a much lower percentage of it, because and it's just that whole conversation and confidence. Confidence.
I remember when I first started out and I was moving from teaching into this, and I did the same I did like a test for people entering into cybersecurity, and it was more the self-limiting beliefs that people had about what they perceived that you needed to be like or have to be able to get into that sector. And when we removed that from their capability or their ability to tick things off, and we showed them the sort of percentage of overlap that they had or potential to be able to grow in that role or even apply for those roles, it was incredible. We saw that younger people had more problem solving skills that they thought that they had, and that actually when we removed the job title for women again, that they were really surprised. I would never have chosen that as a career pathway. I would just never have thought, or like the perception of I thought I had to be really good at maths, or really, I had to code to do something like this. It's background bias is a huge thing. I've often thought that as well about being Scottish. We're not very good at like getting on our soapbox and talking about ourselves and communicating who we are. I guess that's where some of my my desire for technology to be able to help people to be able to communicate in a really simple way. Here are all the things that I can do, and this is my potential as a person. But also for them to see that, rather than coming from one of us as a careers advisor or recruiter or a teacher. Because sometimes I think we kind of, until you see it for yourself, it's hard to kind of like go, oh really? The data helps in that way, I guess.
Yeah. So I think we've got we can talk for hours, obviously, because that's who we are. But if anybody, if anyone else is listening and wants to, if they've got some thoughts about the sort of thing that we're talking about. So we've been talking a little bit this week there about sort of the challenges with change, challenges with transition.
Yes.
We've touched a little bit on some of the job losses that we've seen this week.
Yes.
We've touched a little bit on some of like the energy transition and technology transition, digital transformation stuff that people are coping with as well. I think we're going to have some more conversations. I think that'll be really good. There's things that I think I'd like us to talk about in future around maybe it's things like access to building as well, construction. We know that the energy transition isn't just about energy companies. It's about education. It's about construction. It's about manufacturing. It's about high value manufacturing. It's about innovation. There's so much in that space and so much opportunity in that space. So I think we can definitely have some conversations around that as well.
I think so. It's the supply chain. People need to look at this. It's like the Jenga block game. We can't just like pull one out and then hope that the rest stands up. It's like all the summative parts towards that. It's the same in business as well. I sometimes think that people even look at the brand if they're applying for a job and they think, oh, I don't know if I've got a place there. And just seeing that they need lots of people in the business that you might not even be able to imagine where your fit would be in that. So debunking those myths.
Yeah, I think that would be really, it'd be a really interesting conversation. So I think what we'll do is we've talked for a wee while, and I think it's probably time for us to close off this podcast. So it's been really good, and I think what we'll do is we'll throw it out there, and we'll have another couple of conversations around some different things.
Yep,
and we'll share those.
And I'm sure we'll have some other people as well to come.
I think we will. We've got a few people lined up. So what we'll do is we'll try an experiment. That's the thing, isn't it? What the world needs is another podcast. Not sure it does, but it might need another podcast. And as long as people find this useful and interesting and helpful, then we'll continue doing it. That's the whole point. We're not trying to, we're not trying to do anything other than just helpful for people, really.
Absolutely.
So I think we'll say thank you there.
And nice to meet everybody, I guess. Today.
Yeah, nice to meet everyone. And do let us know what you think. If this is useful to you, please do let us know. And if you're interested in speaking as well and joining in, let us know as well.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Skillsminer podcast. You can subscribe to follow our channel on YouTube, and you can find this podcast on Spotify.